mystical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL network.
Yes, so welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network here for our Week 4 Patron Feedback Show. And this is the show where we answer questions from the week and look forward to the next. And I am very excited to do that. It has been an amazing week of podcasts, let alone the show this past week, in my opinion. Hot Take Show was super fun, roundtable, great discussions on Halloween night. In case you were out trick-or-treating, go back and check out that one. And last night, TJ Randolph was on the By the Numbers show, breaking things down with Nicole and Mike Murray. So go back and check out all those shows. But tonight we have some very special guests. Thank you for everybody who sent in their questions for this show. You can always do so either on the day before or the day of the show in our forum on Twitter and on Instagram, where you can ask us questions about the previous week, and we look forward to the next. But now introducing some of our patrons, some of our biggest supporters here at the Saturday Night Network. And of course, if you would like to become a patron and podcast with us, you can do so at patreon.com/the SNL Network. But let me introduce for the first time making his podcasting debut, it is James Matthew Andrews. James, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. I was sort of asked at the last minute to replace someone, said yes. Excited to be here. Although I do have one question.
Okay. Any
John,
questions?
John, you're hosting this podcast right now, correct?
Correct.
And Thomas, you have a podcast, a fantastic one called SNL Hall of Fame, right?
That's correct, and thank you for the plug.
Was I supposed to host a podcast in order to be on tonight? I feel like I'm joining without doing the homework. I just wanted to make sure.
Well, I think that this could be potential practice for future hosting of a podcast. So think about what you would like to do, and we'll, Thomas and I are very experienced in the space.
Oh, that's bad news for everyone. No.
For sure. Well, happy to have you on. Happy to get to hear your thoughts on the season so far. But he's already been introduced, so let me hand things over to my man, Thomas Senna. Thomas, how are you?
I'm doing great today. Thank you so much for having me. I got a little bounce in my step. It's been a really good week. I have a special guest joining me today. It's Mr. David S. Pumpkins in Funko Pop form to celebrate the return, the glorious return on Saturdays. So Mr. David S. Pumpkins will be by my side tonight for this podcast.
David Pumpkins from before.
I love that. Yeah, very happy to have you on, Thomas. So excited to get to talk to you. Always one of our great patron guests that we get to have on these shows. So yeah, let's talk about this Jack Harlow episode as we'll put the final words on what we saw from this past week. So really storylines for me from the week that I'm sort of taking away that I think I'm going to remember. Jack Harlow, I think not a lot of hype coming into this episode. In fact, I think people were sort of dreading Jack Harlow coming in. I don't think he was that bad. Like, I think he was actually pretty serviceable and good. James, you agree?
Yeah, I agree. When he was announced as host that weekend, Willie Geist, who has a podcast called The Sunday Sit Down, that week he interviewed Jack Harlow, and I decided to listen to it, and he just could not hold a conversation. And I was like, oh no, if this guy can't hold a conversation, how can he hold a monologue? How can he hold a sketch? This is going to be bad. And it turned out to be, I would say, not the best, but the most exciting show. I think that there was just a lot of excitement while watching the show. And I think some of that has to do with him, some of it not, obviously. But definitely, I definitely treated him wrong in the preparation up to the show.
Yeah, I would think so also. I mean, I always like to say, and I was talking to a lot of people in our community who were kind of nervous about it. If somebody's never hosted a show before, I think we always got to give them a chance. That's just my opinion. Unless they're like a really bad person, then we have no evidence of Jack Harlow being a bad person. But maybe he's very good at sketch comedy. I think he was good at sketch comedy. I just don't know that he was like, he's not like this amazing host we have to see back. But I did a serviceable job. So Thomas, what did you think? How did Jack Harlow do in the end?
Coming in, I was actually pretty skeptical about Jack Harlow, but I think it was you, John, that brought up a good point that his personality isn't so big that the show might revolve around him and maybe derail some things. I felt that way with Megan Thee Stallion, that I think her personality is such that it was too much about her, I think, that episode. But this one, Jack Harlow, I think he was easy to write around. He was like a fresh piece of clay that the show can kind of mold. They can sculpt into Justin Timberlake off of memory if they wanted to. And just, I think he kind of was a chameleon in a way and fit in. And it was nice that he didn't have to dominate the show with his personality, because to James' point, maybe he doesn't have much of a big personality, but that I think that played to his benefit and the episode's benefit for sure. And I was pleasantly surprised. And just a PSA, rewatch the episodes, because I always enjoy the episodes on second watch. And I thought it was okay watching it live Saturday night, but I rewatched it earlier this week, and I'm firmly on board with this was a really good episode.
Oh, no question. I think that, a lot of people who are not in our community would say that SNL is just meant to be watched with this live experience, but it's really not. I think you can get so much more out of these episodes by rewatching them. So totally agree. And that's been obviously my process for doing all of these podcasts. But yeah, so that's one storyline this week. We obviously had a couple bigger ones. Let's talk about quickly Bobby Moynihan's return to the show. I think that was like general excitement, like crazy. People were going nuts. And James, were you a big Bobby guy?
Man, I hate whenever someone says, I don't like best cast member. I don't like that phrase. I do have a favorite, and it's a tie between Phil Hartman and Bobby Moynihan. When I watched that Bobby, when I saw him come on, I was excited because I do think he is, like John tweeted the other day, he's one of the most underrated performers that this show has had. To have that longevity and to have someone who isn't a star. I feel like a lot of people think to be a great cast member, you have to be a star. And I don't think so. I think in order to be a great cast member, you just need to have a good consistency. You got to have a good record. And he always killed. And, I don't think he truly got the respect he deserved. And I think him coming out as John Kunkel and him getting a huge applause, I think that was heartwarming to see.
Yeah, when I said underrated, I really just was trying to think, like, I see he's the most underrated ever. I can't think of another cast member that sort of fits into the description of his time at the show. Like, I can't think of somebody who basically joins not at the end of an era, but really in the latter part. Maybe Mike Myers would be the one that I would think maybe would apply to this, just thinking back, but like somebody who joins near the end, does a very good job at fitting into this existing cast, and then sort of leads the next group. It's something that was really fascinating to watch, and I don't think gets talked about enough. So, Thomas, how do you feel about Bobby coming back and the things that we're discussing?
I love that Bobby's getting his due now, because I think he got lost in the shuffle. He
Yeah.
had the misfortune maybe of being castmates with bigger personalities and more name recognition, like Bill Hader, Jason Sudeikis, Fred Armisen. He came in when those guys were already getting established, and then another big personality, or Kristen Wiig too, I should say, and then another big personality like Kate McKinnon sort of overshadowed a lot of what Bobby was doing. But I loved it in real time. I was a huge Bobby fan, and I felt at the time that not enough people were talking about him. So I love the warm reception that he got when he came back. I loved your tweet about him being underrated, and I don't always love talking about overrated and underrated, but I think it's appropriate with Bobby. I think you're absolutely right, and I was ecstatic when he came back, and I just loved seeing the outpouring of just love and warmth for Bobby.
Yeah, Thomas, I'm glad nobody asked who is the most overrated cast member of all time. That we wouldn't have to. We
Oh
wouldn't be
boy, we could do a whole episode on that now.
Yeah, paging the superfans. So yeah, let's so that, to me was obviously a huge storyline, and then the other one was obviously bringing in Tom Hanks for a Halloween episode, and we got this return of David as Pumpkin. So we have some questions about that coming up, so I'm not going to get into that too deep right now, but before we get to our questions, and I'd always like to ask our patrons if there was a sketch that they just really loved or felt like they're going to remember from this episode a lot. So James, what about you? Any sketches that you just like stood out to you from this episode?
I'm gonna go with the AA meeting. There was just something. I knew that when Jack Harlow said, "I have an idea for," I knew it was like, "Oh, okay, here it's." I know exactly how this is going to be played out. I've seen this hundreds of times. I know how this is going to play out. But I think what's different with this particular sketch is that the cast performing it killed. There was no one person over the other. There was no like everyone did their own thing and they did it respectably, which is much better than you could have, if it was, done in a different era, or even if it was done a year ago. So I respect how it was played, and I also just having Tom Hanks come in and having that sketch early in the rundown definitely set up the tone of, are we getting David S. Pumpkins?
Definitely. I, thought this was really interesting. Last night on the By the Number show, Mike said that this was his favorite sketch from the season. And it got me to thinking, I was thinking about this, like, I don't know what my favorite sketch from the season is. And then last season, by this time, we had Mattress Store, which was in episode 3. And then we had the teacher sketch with Jason and Ego, which was episode 4. And we like those two were generally regarded as like 9 out of 10s or 10s out of 10s. I don't know if we've had a 10 out of 10 sketch so far this season, which has been interesting because I think 2 of the episodes have been pretty good. 2 of them have been like okay, I would say. But the season I would say has probably been a little bit inconsistent. That's the general view. But I can't find a sketch that I'm like, wow, this is going to be a standout, memorable sketch from season 48 yet. Though AA meeting was very good. Thomas, let me get your thoughts on that, and if there's any other sketches from this episode that you want to make sure you felt are, something that stood out to you.
Yeah, if I'm looking for like a 10 out of 10 sketch, I'll be comparing it to Monkey Judge from last season as far as live sketches go. I think that was my favorite, one of my favorites of this era. My favorite live sketch of the night was the AA meeting. I think that was super clever. I think that was Jack Harlow's best performance of the entire evening. Honestly, I think his cadence and his delivery was perfect for that sketch. Whether or not he did it on purpose or whether the writing in the sketch fit his tone, I don't know. But I do know that that's what I enjoyed him the most in that night. So that was perfect, a perfect thing to bring up, James. The one that I wanted to talk about is a pre-tape. It was the 2024 horror movie pre-tape, which I thought was just so well done, and I think it perfectly captured feelings. I know myself, I've ruminated back and forth. Are we back to Biden? Is there a better choice? Oh my gosh, he's 79. Like all this, everything that they ruminated on in that sketch is something that I know I've talked to people online about. My wife and I have talked about a lot of that stuff. So when she and I were watching it together after it ended, we just looked at each other and like, man, that's like almost a dramatized version of a conversation that we've had about this very subject. So it just tapped into that so perfectly when Punky said, "Look at the wall," and it said Bernie and blood on the wall. Like there was just little touches like that. My favorite moment of the night was when Punky calculated 79 plus 2 on her calculator on her laptop. That was like my moment of the night. That's what that just got me. So I just really love that sketch.
Yeah. What would you guys, we'll start off our questions in just a second, but here, Jon Schneider comes in with the first question. What would you say is not your favorite sketch from the season, but like objectively what you believe is the best sketch of the season so far? I know I'm putting you on the spot because we didn't have this as a question, but I'm just curious your opinions. James, what do you think?
So what I do is after I watch an episode, I rate it on my phone, and then I calculate the average for that episode. So it's out of 5 stars, and I just calculate it. So I actually have it pulled up and I can just, if it's all right, I can just read off the ones that I have given a few 5s out of 5. I have given a few 5. I don't know, but like you said, I don't know which one's my favorite. I have the Manning cast cold open.
Okay.
From the first episode. I have new cast advice from the Brendan Gleeson episode. And then I have just weekend update from this episode, from this weekend. I thought weekend update was really strong. And that's it. Like I don't have there isn't anything else.
I'm glad you said that because I was gonna say I think objectively the best sketch for the season might be the cold opening in the premiere, which is crazy. That's like you would never bet on that in Vegas. But Thomas, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I had the cold open, the Manning cast from the Miles Teller episode. The classroom sketch that Ego led at the end of the Megan Thee Stallion episode, I think that was oddly placed. And I know there's dozens of reasons why sketches placed where they are, but I think the writing in that was super clever. The new cast advice might be the one that has left an imprint on me the most, I think. So I'd probably have to say that's the most memorable and possibly my favorite of the season.
Right. So I see all of those. And I think what's going to be interesting in these next 2 episodes for this run is, will we get a consensus best sketch of the season? Because I don't think we have one yet. I think there's sketches we all like, we all think may be there right now, but I think that spot is fluid. So let's watch out for that over the next couple of episodes. Okay, thanks to everybody who sent in their questions this week. Gentlemen, do you have the questions in front of you? Okay, perfect. Let's get going. Let's take our first question from our friend Blood Meridian, who would like to know, of the 4 featured players, whom do you think is making their mark so far? Not only in terms of getting roles, but also in terms of carving a niche for themselves in both type of a role and as a specialty player. Thanks as always for these shows. Thanks for checking them out, Blood. So again, who do we think is making a mark so far and building a niche for themselves? James, I'll start with you on this one.
I don't want to seem biased. However, I will say Michael Longfellow. I got to see him this summer because I loved him. I saw his set on Conan, thought he was hilarious. Went to go see him this summer. Again, didn't think he is a sketch actor, but the past 4 episodes, he has proved himself to be a reliable supporting player, which I think is more important than, I would say, having a standout sketch in like your first couple of episodes and then not getting anything else for a while. I think it's more important to be a reliable supporting player, and that's mostly what he's been. And he just has this sense of, someone compared him to Bill Hader, and I saw that resemblance, and I was like, oh, like that kind of makes sense. Like he kind of fits not an impression role, but just in that role of like, he can do something in a way that is just laughable, like him in the promo this week, him dressed as a baby, that was hilarious. And then they did
Let me just explain that for any of the listeners who may not have caught the promo, just so they know what that is. So there is a promo that they released now. They've been doing this every single week since the Gleason week in the middle of the week, which is a pre-produced promo, unlike the host, musical guest, and one cast member standing out there and telling a joke about their name. It's now something that's like a little sketch, a mini sketch, maybe for 30 seconds to a minute. And in this particular sketch for the Amy Schumer week, we did have Michael Longfellow appear as Amy Schumer's baby. So, and it was really great. So James, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and there was also, they did a backstage video where it was Jeff Probst talking to the newbies like a very Survivor, and it moves over and it's all them, and Longfellow is wearing a bald cap because he had to play Pennywise, and so they're like acting in it, and then Longfellow says, "I didn't catch any of that," and they all turn and they just see him in the bald cap, and they all just lose it, and I don't know if any of the other newbies could have just like had them lose it and just like the bald cap look, which is something that everyone you see, but the way he looked in it was hilarious, and I gotta go with Longfellow.
Okay, Thomas, do you concur, or do you have another one you're going to pick?
I had 2 that immediately came to mind. Michael Longfellow was one of them, so that was well said. Everything that you said, I agree with. But the other one, and I'm not seeing it in the chat here, so it might surprise some people, but it's Molly Carney. Actually, has really stood out to me, and I don't know. I don't know if I could pinpoint what their niche is right now, but I think I know more about them. I know what kind of character they're comfortable playing, and I just get a feeling like I know who they are. I'm talking about like the new cast advice sketch, which we all loved. Molly led that sketch with some comic relief from Marcelo too. The AA meeting sketch, I think Molly's delivery was spot on there. They had the first line basically in a response to Jack Harlow saying that he had an idea for a Pixar movie, and then Molly chimed in and just had spot on comedic timing with the in that sketch. And I think the Halloween red carpet sketch when Molly was just saying Tom Brady and just acting drunk and everything. So I can't quite pinpoint I guess, give a word to what their niche is, but I feel like I know Molly, and there's something there that they've been able to carve out for themselves.
Definitely. I don't know if it's because we have seen the other three on Update, but I do feel like we haven't seen enough of Molly yet for sure for me. I think that they're doing a lot in this moments that they've been given, but I don't know that I feel so strongly about Molly just yet, though I do see their potential like crazy. But I will say about Michael Longfellow, and I think Marcelo and Devin have been doing a great job as well. I mean, really just a very strong class of rookies so far. But with regards to Michael Longfellow, just personally, he has like hit my funny bone in a way that, again, like not many people do on this show. I think Andrew Dismukes does it, Sarah Sherman does it, and it's the weird. I really just love like when people are weird. And we talked in the preseason about getting Andrew and Longfellow like together in sketches. They were together in that headshot sketch for a brief moment, but we really haven't seen them completely explore like getting all these weird people in this group together. And I think that he is such a fun addition to the cast. Like the fact that the cast is just a touch smaller this year, which we haven't really gotten to talk about very much, but going from 21 to 17 is like a really big deal. And that we have at least Andrew, at least Sarah, and at least Michael Longfellow, who are just freaking weirdos. Like that's a good percentage of the cast that you need. And it's sort of proportional to what we've seen in the previous eras, with Forte being like the weird one to come and do crazy stuff. So I really find that I'm enjoying what I get to see from him. And I'll say on top of that, Sean Grant, who was on a roundtable this past Monday, he knows Longfellow. He's talked to him. He's done stand up with him and stuff like that. He's like, he is not this guy at all. Like, so, you know, what's great to hear that is that he's sort of like method in the way that he does his weird. Like he has this like secret weirdness. And those are the types of weird people that I absolutely love, because then when they're out on stage, they get to like bring it all out and put it out there for the crowd. And I'm excited about it.
I do think Michael Longfellow has seemed more comfortable, probably the most comfortable of the four. His Update appearance, he was just like super calm and collected. I know that's his persona, but he didn't even seem like he was that nervous. Devin was, to me, very nervous on Update. Understandably, I'd be shaking if I was on Update. But Michael Longfellow just seems very comfortable in his skin in sketches and in that one Update appearance.
Yeah. Okay, let's take this next question from our friend Ken George Jones. Ken would like to know, or would like to tell us, that cold opens seem to generate much of SNL's media coverage. In an episode like Harlow's, which had the proper return, or had the return of a popular alumni, a host, recurring characters, plus several buzzy pieces like the Kanye and the 2024 pre-tapes, you had many people saying SNL takes on Republican candidates as the headlines. This is something I think many viewers, current and lapsed, are fatigued of hearing about. Do you think the choice of using a cold open like this is counterproductive for episodes which are meant to be part of a new era of the show, or meant to appeal to some of those lapsed viewers? So very interesting question here, Ken. Thomas, what do you think?
I think, yeah, thank you, Ken, for the question. I think it can be actually counterproductive to make content decisions that are based on whether or not you're going to get buzz. And I understand they still need to promote the show and they need viewers and everything, but if they don't have much to say, then the buzz or the attention is only going to take you so far, and it might actually be counterproductive if you don't have much to say and you get a lot of attention and then it's negative. I'm thinking of like the Sesame Street, the Joe, when Pete Davidson was Joe Rogan, and that was a mess, and it got them attention, but not in a great way. So I think it could be counterproductive if that's all you're looking for is buzz. And I think a lot of times SNL can rely a little much with their cold opens on like rip from the headlines sorts of cold opens without much of a point of view. They just sort of regurgitate what's already been said. As far as what their goal is with this new era, I think just as long as it can be political, as long as they have a perspective and if it doesn't just feel obligatory, which sometimes I think can happen with cold opens from this era.
I agree. Let's talk about the structure of this cold open, which is one host in Heidi, who hasn't always been the host or anchor of a cold open in that sense. Then three different people coming on. That's it. Three. And then obviously we got the solo live from New York. So that is huge in my opinion. I know that wasn't addressing Ken's question directly, but the differences between a cold open like this from a political perspective, where they're actually just talking about 3 candidates versus what we got in 47 and 46 most recently, which was them bringing on, okay, who can do an impression of this person? Let's bring out this random celebrity who's kind of Republican. Like that wasn't this, and that was actually pretty good. Even though this may have been my least favorite cold open of the season so far, I think the structure there was there to have elements of something very good. James, we'd love to get your thoughts on Ken's question.
Yeah, Thomas put it pretty well. I mean, to be honest, like, I don't think these cold opens get, I would say, get the attention. Yes, they get tons of articles, but I think that's just how, like, I would say the media has been with SNL. I feel like, it's ever since Alec Baldwin played Trump, it's like, well, we got to make an article about this. But really, when you come down to what I think actual people think of this, I haven't seen many people like this, like actually like this kind of political cold opens. Now, I will say that the one that we had this week, much better than the ones from the past couple of years. I think it's better to, have it short, have it just one person interview 3 people. But that being said, if you look at the impressions were not that good. So I feel like it's sort of like what Thomas said. You got to, if they're being counterproductive in the sense that we don't want them, but SNL, and I feel like not like they're paired with the media, but I feel like that sort of article clickbait thing, they want that. And also, I do feel like when people watch these sketches, like you said, it's for I especially last season and before that, it was for 2 reasons. One, it was cringy. They had a cringy take. It didn't work. The other reason I would say is they watched it for who's in it: Kate McKinnon, A.D. Bryant, those big stars that are no longer on the show. Yes, it's a political cold open, but I don't think someone's seen like, oh, they're making fun of Trump. I don't think someone's clicking on it and saying, oh man, I really hope Michael Longfellow plays Adam Schiff in here. Like, I don't think anyone's clicking it for that as much. I just praised Longfellow, but people watched it because they wanted to see Kate doing Giuliani, and that's not happening now. And maybe it'll happen soon, and they don't beat it to death. But those were the 2 main reasons I think those cold opens got attention.
Yeah, I would say, to more directly answer Ken's question from my perspective, I would say that SNL really sort of has no choice, in my opinion, to cover something political at this point. Maybe the point of view isn't exactly always perfect, but, they have to do this where we're approaching the midterms and, the political talk is just dominating general media. And I'll pull back the curtain on what, goes down here at the Saturday Night Network when we're trying to produce and get our content out to people. Oftentimes I'll sit down with Nicole and we'll talk about, okay, like what from the episode do we want to promote as our discussion points and our analysis and stuff like that. And there was a very interesting debate that I had with Nicole this week where we were talking about, should we promote David S. Pumpkin's return, which was to me the biggest storyline of the night from an SNL perspective, or should we promote the Kanye stuff, or the Republican, or the Republican cold open, or the Democratic pre-tape that we got. And we ended up going with David S. Pumpkin because like I had a gut feeling about it, but I definitely can see in the clicks and the views of some of the clips that we post and stuff like that, it's a game changer from a journalistic perspective to post political media. Just more people are interested. More people want to know what SNL has to say about politics at this point, even if it's like from a hate watching perspective. So I can understand that, if you Google SNL at 1:05 in the morning, it's going to be SNL goes after Republicans and this, because that's what makes sense for the media to do something like that. And it's not always the way that like I wish it was. I wish the story could be from a journalistic perspective, always like Bobby Moynihan returns, David S. Pumpkins is back, like all that stuff. That to me is like fun in our community. But for like larger people who aren't SNL watchers and watch it all the time, they want to know like the political stuff, because that's sort of like SNL has turned into either like they're completely against what SNL is saying about politics, or they're kind of supportive of it. And like you're either like, it's a hate love thing at this point, unfortunately, because politics is like so polarizing at this point. Okay, let's take this next question from Jeremy. Jeremy asks, is Bobby Moynihan the greatest cast member to have never hosted the show? So thanks for the question, Jeremy. James, I know you're a big Bobby guy, so let me ask you, is he the greatest cast member to have never hosted SNL?
Yes. Next question. No. Him, and I'm going to throw out another name that I don't think gets enough recognition, and didn't have the career as big as a career as I guess most people would hope. I'm gonna go with Tim Meadows. I think when you look at season 20 to season 21, Tim Meadows, I think, had the biggest jump arc of any cast member, from only being used in OJ sketches to singing live from New York. I believe the first 4 episodes of the show, and it makes it even crazier when you think that Tim was fired during that summer and then brought back because they couldn't find another black male cast member. And as much as I love Bobby, I gotta go with Tim.
Okay, Thomas, what's your opinion?
Yeah, Tim Meadows is such a great answer. And James, you know your SNL history. That was awesome. I love, love, love Tim Meadows. I'm seeing a lot of good answers in the chat. Anna Gasteyer, Chris Parnell. But Jeremy, I want to thank you for asking this question, because John knows that if I get invited onto a podcast, I'm going to try to shoehorn Vanessa Bayer into the conversation somehow. If you invite me on a basketball podcast, I'm going to talk about Vanessa Bayer at some point in that podcast. So obviously my answer is Vanessa Bayer is the greatest cast member to have never hosted the show. And to your point about Bobby Moynihan, John, about being underrated for their era, I think Vanessa Bayer falls into that category too. I think Vanessa Bayer needs to be looked at as an all-time great cast member. There were so many home runs and triples that Vanessa hit in her time on the show that she just never really got talked about enough, as much as she should have when she was on the show. And I think she's one of the all-time greats. I hope she comes back. I think there's a small chance this year she'll come back. She has her Showtime show that's going to have a season 2. So I'm hoping the show SNL asked her to come back and host, but Vanessa Bayer, we cross our fingers for that. Yeah, Vanessa Bayer is my answer, the greatest cast member to have never hosted the show.
Okay. For me, and I think these are all great picks, I'm just going to be, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out because it's kind of too soon, but Kate McKinnon is the obvious answer for the greatest cast member to have never hosted SNL at this point, I would think, right? Just objectively, if you're going to put a greatest cast member list, I think she has the highest average of somebody who's like never hosted the show in terms of overall career arc and rating. But she's only been gone for 4 episodes. So I know that's not the serious answer that Jeremy is looking for. But I will say a name that hasn't gotten brought up tonight that I think has to be under consideration would be Kevin Nealon. I think that he had a very strong, time on the show. I think a lot of his contemporaries got a chance to host the show and come back. And I think he was one of the people that was probably overshadowed. So I would say that would be one. And then, of course, the late, great Jan Hooks never got to host the show. So that would be somebody I would think of as well. And of course, I'm still of the belief, and I'm just throwing out this crazy idea. I think I've said it before on the podcast. I believe that season 50, the living members of the original cast will all come back and host the show together. I think that's going to happen at some point. So I think you'll get, the ones that we're talking about. I see Jane and Lorraine in the cast in the chat and stuff like that. And I believe they will be a part of whatever celebration happens in a couple of years. So that would be fun as well. James, I see your mind is pondering thinking about
you said you just said that they'll all just come back and host an episode. Isn't that just an anniversary special technically? Yeah, it's not hosting, but
yeah, you just wait for what's going to look like in 2 years. I think we're getting all greatest hosts of all time hosting the show. I think we're getting all former alumni. I think it's going to be a year's worth of celebration, in my opinion. So
Steven Seagal, please come back.
So We'll see. We'll see. Martin Lawrence, maybe. So let's take this next question from our friend Eric, who joined us last week. Eric wanted to know, this week we saw the return of Bobby, a member of what many consider a more transition or perhaps lost era of him, Vanessa, Nassim, Taryn, and Jay, cast members who played their part but were never the stars and have made rare appearances post tenure. Given that this is a transition season, do you think a similar transition cast of newer vets exists already and will give way to the dominance of the new cast? Or do you think that the transition will allow the newer vets to become stars of the show for a few years? Thomas, let me get your opinion on this.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. And I'm trying to, in real time, I'm trying to parse out kind of the definitions here of transition cast and everything like that. But I think
so here, let me just clarify, just to make sure I understand this correctly, if this is okay. I think that what he's asking is like the newer veterans, the people like the Heidis and the Egos and stuff like that, people who've been around for a few years that are not the newbies, are they going to be part of a lost era potentially like we saw previously, or are they going to have a few years to set themselves up as stars?
I think if we're talking people like Ego and Heidi, I think they're actually going to have time to position themselves as the stars of the show. I actually think the transition cast was maybe people like Beck Bennett, Kyle Mooney, Chris Redd, Melissa Villasenor, kind of that era, because they coincided too much with Kate McKinnon and Cecily and 80 in that group. So maybe they got lost in that shuffle, but then they didn't stick around after Kate left, and obviously Cecily's still here. So I think, again, Beck, Kyle, Chris Redd, part of that transition cast to me. So I think the Heidi's, Ego, maybe Chloe fits into that. I think they're actually positioned to be the stars of the show for maybe a handful of years to come.
James, what do you think?
I mean, it's hard to say. Yeah, it's really hard to say. Again, I think you can look at many people on the show, who had a great tenure on the show and then maybe got lost in their career. So I think Heidi and Ego, they definitely have the chance to become popular actresses once they leave the show. Mikey Day, I think he definitely has a career with Streeter Seidel writing reboots of Christmas movies that aren't that great. Sorry. But it's hard to say. It really is hard to say. And I do agree with Thomas that there is sort of a lost cast that I would say, I think once time goes by, we are going to say man, remember Melissa and Alex and Chris? Oh man, those guys, they don't get enough. And that's, I wouldn't call it a transition cast, as Eric puts it, but I would just say, and again, I know Thomas doesn't like this, but underrated cast members, that's yeah, I don't know.
I think it's a good answer. I think that they were talking about this on the By the Number show last night. I couldn't agree more that this felt like an ensemble cast. And I think that if we walk away at the end of season 48 saying that this year was an ensemble, there's no stars, then it will feel like a transition era, because we're not going to remember it in the sense of oh, this was Chloe's cast or type of thing, the way we would remember it being like Kate and Cecily in 80s or something like that of the last few years. I don't know that, I think it was Bill Simmons who was talking about this is the first time in a very long time that there's no real star of the show, and SNL is a star making place. Now, does somebody like Bowen Yang become a star and ends up becoming the star of the show in that case? Are we going to look back a couple years from now and say this was the start of Bowen, becoming the dominant player on the show? If that's the case, then I think that some of these people will get lost in the mix. But the question is I haven't seen enough evidence yet to know which of these people are leading the pack to say that we are in the Bowen Yang era or the Chloe Fineman era or the, Punky Johnson era, Ego Wodum era. I haven't seen that yet. We've seen episodes, we've seen moments, but they haven't done it on a consistent basis yet, where I think we have enough information to know which of the last few years are transitional pieces and which are the stars of the future. Okay, let's take this next question from Kylie. So I'll go to you, James, on this one first. Kylie Leonard wants to know, what could SNL have done with David Pumpkins to spice up this sketch a little bit? So this was a question I think we addressed throughout the week, where we felt that the David S. Pumpkins sketch was paint by numbers to the first one. I liked that personally. A lot of people didn't. So for you, how do you feel like it could have been spiced up, if at all?
I wouldn't call it cheating, but when I like to write stuff, short pieces, sketches, whatever, when I'm writing that stuff, I like to cheat a little bit and make the ending meta. When you make the ending meta, it solves all your problems. It really does. And I feel like if they had made this meta when like David S. Pumpkins comes out and Andrew and Ego and Jack are, okay, it's Tom Hanks. They could have done so much with that, and they could, but that's my opinion. They could have done other stuff that to make the sketch better. Again, I don't think it was there as more of like David S. Pumpkins Part 2. I think it was more of like, all right, you guys want to see Tom Hanks do David S. Pumpkins? Here it is. Shut up. So, so either one of those.
Thomas, what do you think?
Oh, first of all, Kylie, thank you for the question. And Monette pointed out in the chat, but I want to say that we see you with the pumpkin spice wordplay. That was awesome. Good job there. I'm in agreement with John about I don't mind the same beats or like the paint by numbers types of things. We saw that with Stefan. We saw that with What's Up With That. I think it matters how you use those beats and what types of jokes and different things that you put in those. And I think this David S. Pumpkin sketch had enough different types of jokes within the same beats for me to feel satisfied. But if you want to spice things up a little bit, I was thinking maybe do the sketch from the perspective of David S. Pumpkins and the skeletons waiting for the doors to open, and then they go entertain the riders in the ride. So maybe and this might ruin this character, may not, but maybe David S. Pumpkins and the skeletons are just having mundane kind of funny conversation or whatever, and then they're like, oh, okay, it's our turn, and then the doors open and then they do their thing and they go back and then they just kind of talk normally again. I don't know. I'm only about 4 pages into this sketch in my Word document. I don't have it all fleshed out, but I think that could be an interesting take on David Pumpkins is reverse the perspective of the sketch.
Wow, what a crazy idea. I love this. This is fascinating.
To play off of that, it would be funny if like again, like it's like their not first view perspective, but it just showed them just like behind, and it just again like I think big character driven, like when the doors open, it's big Tom Hanks, David S. Pumpkins energy, and then when the doors close, they're chain smoking.
They're taking drags of a cigarette. And they're like, oh yeah. God, how many more of these? So they maybe reference like that. The riders are saying how much more of David Pumpkins. Maybe they have the same question, like how much more do we have to do tonight? Like I don't know. It could be. I think that would be interesting.
They're like the Italian guys from the Vinny Vedecci sketch, where like they're just like smoking on the side. Yeah, I think that's really great. And I forget who said it on the podcast sometime this week, where someone said that when he said this line.
David Pumpkins is
taking it one day at a time.
That was like a reference to the AA meeting, which I think was like a pretty funny idea. Well, I mean, who knows? But I would say I really liked the sketch writing. My only change that I wish they had made was I wish it wasn't an elevator sketch. I wish that it was, they could have done the exact same sketch, which would have been fine. It would have been very to the effect of like any Kristen Wiig era character that's, just basically the same thing, but in a different environment. But I would instead lead the surprise to be the arrival of David S. Pumpkins, because the lines don't bother me, but I didn't like that the surprise was ruined and expected. So what I would have suggested would be like perhaps something to the effect of like kids going trick-or-treating and ringing people's doorbells. And then behind one of the doors is David S. Pumpkins.
Hear me out. You combine 2 sketches, David S. Pumpkins in an AA meeting.
Oh,
ooh.
Okay. Do you see?
Right.
This is very, very much like the PDD and Five Timers Club from last season. Yeah.
I think SNL is going to be getting a packet from the 3 of us shortly.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And for anybody listening, I know we're not the writers of the show. We're just having some fun. Okay, so let's take this question from at Lynn Bumps on Instagram. Can you explain the Joker sketch? I liked Jeff Probst, but that was it. Thomas, want to take a crack at this one?
Yes, this sketch was fascinating to me. It wasn't my favorite, but there was a kernel of a premise there that I really loved, and I think what it suffered from for me was the accents, I think, clouded it because you had one weird thing, which was the best man wanted to be at the wedding as the Joker. You didn't need to put another weird thing on top of that because to me that takes away the impact of what was already a weird premise. So I think a lot of people, when talking about sketch, like to use like to say putting a hat on top of a hat. And to me, that's what this was, is you already had the weird premise. You didn't need the weird accents because then it just took away from the weird premise. So I would have, if you would have cut the accents, I think the whole idea of it's Halloween and the best man wants to go to his friend's wedding as the Joker, and then as the escalation was there, so they, I think the people at the wedding treating a very silly topic super seriously and voting on it and having opinions on it all worked well for me. So there was good escalation. The Jeff Probst, I'm not a Survivor fan. That was fine. But I think there was good escalation. The beats were there. It was pretty witty, but I think just combining two weird elements kind of canceled each other out and just I think the sketch didn't have the impact that it could have, in my opinion.
James, what do you think?
Man, this felt like a sketch from season 11. I could totally see Michael Hall and Andrew's role. It just felt weird, man. Uh, I, you know, it's definitely the type of sketch where it depends. In theory, it depends more on the performer than it does on the writing. You know, okay, the writing's not that great, but if I say God, I've not been able to get it right all week. Joker, is that it?
It was this.
But I said I was gonna dress like Joker.
Ah, okay, what Joker? Uh, it
Yeah, you got it.
if you okay, awesome. All right, finally approval from my parents. If I think that it, the writing is weak, but if I perform it correctly, it'll make up for the loose writing. And as much as I love Andrew, it didn't work, and normally this is someone who does have great energy and can, you know, with the way he acts, can change how something is written, but it just didn't work here. And that's, all these sketches are just experiments, we're just experimenting with whatever. And sometimes you're going to experiment with something and it just doesn't turn out well. And I, like Thomas said, there was a kernel of something here, but I just don't know. And there was a hat on a hat, and the Jeff Probst ending. When I saw Jeff Probst, I was like, "What was he truly in this sketch at dress rehearsal, or was he in a different sketch and that got cut?" And they were like, "Well, Jeff Probst is here. We got to use him in something. Throw him at the Joker sketch." So, yeah, I love Andrew, but it just, for whatever reasons, it didn't work.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I think that what they were going for here was just simply that Andrew's character was, interrupting a normal proceeding, and they were just trying to decide, as simple as that, whether he should just maintain in costume or not. But I agree with all the hat on the hat concepts that my panel here has been discussing. I will say that I think that the problem with this sketch, and again, I love Jeff Probst. It was very exciting for me to see him. But the problem with the sketch here was I feel like Andrew lost control of the sketch. He wasn't driving the car the way that he normally does in sketches that work for him. So like all the sketches that you can think of over the last couple of years that have been like him being extremely weird but working, like the Beanie Baby sketch, or let's talk about the headshots from a couple of weeks ago. These are sketches that I feel like he is driving the action. But here, I really felt like the pacing of the sketch was dictated by the people who were asked, or the directing of like, what do you think about this? Like, what is your vote? And then Jeff Probst comes in as another narrator and is casting things. So like James Austin Johnson then going to Sarah and then going to Chloe and stuff like that. Like I felt like the action wasn't through the lens of the Joker character. And I think if we saw the perspective of Andrew as Joker as the lead role here, I think that changes the outlook of the sketch overall. So, because to me, it felt like Andrew wrote a sketch and then took the back seat on it. And I don't think that works when you're trying to be really weird. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Yeah, and I had never thought about it until you just said that. But I think, yeah, if Andrew would have reined it in, yeah, that's such a good point. And by the way, Andrew's probably my favorite cast member. So I say
Same.
this out of love and respect for what he could do. And I think he's with this premise, Andrew still could have made it work with some tweaks. He's still my favorite cast member. So this is just, spitballing.
Now, going off of that, and I just want to know, would it have worked if it was like from last season, one of those big cast pieces? Do you think it would have worked if instead of focusing on like all this other stuff, if it was like, well, let's get everyone who's here at the wedding. What do they think? And it's some of them dressed as Joker or whatever, and some of that. Do you guys think that would have worked like that? No. What do we think?
Well, I don't know because again, I think that maybe having more Jokers in the room, and I think I joked about how if Jeff Probst had come out as Joker, I think that would have made the sketch better. But I think that if I think if there were more people dressed like Joker, it would have been then Andrew then taking control of the room again and being like, see, everybody else came as Joker. And I think that would have led to what I'm sort of talking about, which is him taking as Mike Murray would put it, the A role in the sketch. And I think just what happened here was we were viewing the room from the perspective of everybody else except for Andrew. The only line, which I think was the best line in the whole sketch, was this.
And I've been wanting to dress like Joker ever since last Halloween when I saw a guy dressed like Joker. I said, make sure I'm going to dress like Joker.
And that was the only extended period of time of the sketch where we got to see it from Andrew's perspective. And I think his point of view is so different than every other cast member we've had on the show, maybe except for Michael Longfellow at this point. So it's almost a shame to take that away from him in a sketch that's supposed to be driven by him. All right, let's take this next question that came in from our friend Manette, who wants to know, is Tom Hanks done with hosting SNL? So Tom Hanks, a 10-time host officially with the, counting the At Home episode. So would love to know, James, do you think Tom Hanks is done hosting Saturday Night Live?
That's a good question. I could see him pulling a Steve Martin season 34 and, just not slipping away entirely, but, realize I'm done hosting. That being said, he's had a pretty big year. He was in Elvis. He has a new movie coming out, I think in December. Am I correct? Not sure, but I could see him being convinced, to wanting to come back and maybe host the Christmas episode this season. I feel when the season started and we had lost all these cast members, I felt that they really need strong hosts like Tom Hanks and Adam Driver to come and really, I would say, just make the cast look good, because everyone at that, and still even now, just coming after the cast, oh, it's not as good, blah, 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 blah. And I do think that having Tom Hanks as host will benefit this specific cast, I think, out of any cast that he's hosted during. I really do think that if there were ever a time for Tom Hanks to come and host and help the show, this is it.
Thomas, what do you think?
My gut feeling, Monette, is that Tom Hanks is done with hosting SNL. Ellis, though, did bring up a good point in the chat that we do have a season 50 not too far away. So if Lauren in the show has something special planned at any point during that season, maybe he could come back. I get the feeling that he likes being an SNL legend. He likes doing cameos. I get the feeling that that's fun for him. Maybe an entire week's worth of prep. Maybe not so much. One instance where I can see him coming back is as like an emergency host, which I guess technically SNL does count it. He was like the at home. He's one of the at home show hosts. He did appear with Paul Rudd in that weird episode in December. So I can see him maybe being like an emergency host if they really need somebody and he's available. I can see him stepping in, but I get the feeling that he's probably done with the whole week-long hosting process.
I can see that. I would say, in my opinion, I don't think he's done. I think he's like, first of all, he's in incredible shape. He still kills every single time he's on the show, and like, to me, that just goes to show you that there is absolutely no reason why they wouldn't want him to do it. I see the question from Monette's perspective, where I believe she is saying that he may not want to do it anymore, and from his for his career and where he's at in his life, maybe he just prefers to just like come in every now and then for a cameo. But I have to believe that in some type of celebratory fashion, we're going to get one more Tom Hanks hosting appearance, because I think he just clicks every single time he's there. He's so good. And probably once SNL is wrapped in totality, I think we'll probably get overshadowed a little bit by Steve Martin, but he has to be right up there with the all-time legends of the hosting greats. So would be very thrilled if we got him back.
Going off of what Thomas said, let's keep in mind he has been an emergency host before. He filled in for Joe Pesci at the end of season 17 and had a brilliant episode. So he has been an emergency host before. Whether he would do that at this age now, it's hard to say, but
yeah, I think like 30 years ago, he's probably more prepped to like come in for the week than now, when like if something happened to, Amy Schumer, let's say, for example. But I agree with what you're saying. Okay, let's take this question from our friend Ike Moore. Ike wants to know, what is a sketch from Bobby or Tom that you think is underrated? For me, it's Bobby and Cecily at different jobs making a scene when they think they're getting fired. And for Tom, it's actually a cameo he did when he played himself during a game of Celebrity Jeopardy. So guys, did you come with any underrated Tom or Bobby sketches for today? Thomas, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so for Bobby, it may sound weird because he actually did this 8 times, but we were just talking about how we can maybe tire of political cold opens and whatnot. But I think when he did the Fox and Friends political cold opens, those were really smart, I think, for the most part, and really well done. And I think there should have been more credit given to Bobby in that role, and Taran Killam, and who was the third one in that sketch? Does anybody remember?
Vanessa.
Oh yes, it was Vanessa Bayer. So Bobby, Vanessa, and Taran did a great job on Fox and Friends. And even, it sounds weird, like I said, 8 times that he did it, but I think I just really loved him in that. As far as Tom Hanks, the Mr. Belvedere fan club sketch is one of my all-time favorite sketches, but I don't know that that's underrated in our community. I would say there's a sketch from October of 1988 when he was promoting Big, and it was Big Outtakes. So it was just like Tom Hanks, like showing outtakes of when he was filming Big. So he like ran over a kid when Tom Hanks was rounding the bases, and he bowled over this kid who was playing catcher. It was just basically him bullying kids, kind of a precursor to the Peyton Manning United Way sketch. So I think just Tom Hanks having so much fun, because a lot of things Tom Hanks did are properly rated, honestly. So that one Big Outtakes sketch to me could be underrated. And if you want to hear more about that, listen to the SNL Hall of Fame episode 3. We covered Tom Hanks.
James, what are your picks?
I know that's a good question. I do gotta say, like, that sketch with Bobby and Cecily is great. I say it way more than I should, but that line where they're working at McDonald's and they both sing in unison, ba da ba ba ba, go kill yourself. I say that way more often when I should. I should not say it as often as I do, but I do, because their delivery is so funny. But no, it's a good
James,
question.
that isn't better for you than
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving both.
Which one is better?
Really, John?
Okay, sorry.
I came on here last minute.
Okay.
For Bobby, it's not a sketch, but there are 2 moments in 2 monologues, both hosted by the same kills, and they're both hosted by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And the first one, he did a Make 'em Laugh musical number that's really great. And Bobby just sort of is like, he's just in there. And he repeatedly, for whatever reason, just keeps punching Joseph. And he does them in like the most, in just a way that only he could kill. And then the other one that Joseph Gordon-Levitt hosted, it was a Magic Mike monologue. So it was him and like some of the other male cast members dancing behind him. And there's this part where each of the one by one they each rip off their shirt to reveal their abs, and when it comes to Bobby at the end, he rips off his shirt to reveal he's wearing another shirt underneath. And there's just, it's those moments I feel like I love more than sketches from Bobby, just the little moments where he can just come in and just make something better. And as for Tom, I really wanted to say Mr. Belvedere Fan Club. I really wanted to say that, but I do think, like Thomas said, that it's pretty well known in our community. So instead, I'm going to go with the Apple Support System sketch from season 13. And Kevin Nealon plays the guy who's helping him on the phone, and Tom just plays this manic guy who's just losing control, that his computer won't start at his job. And he's in, again, just in a way that only Tom could play it, because he plays it so seriously. And but it's a good question, and I will try and stop myself from saying that McDonald's one.
Yeah, those are good picks. I think for me, I would say with Bobby Moynihan, there's a couple. One is, I always loved those Morning Miami sketches that we got with, I think, Drake and Miley Cyrus, where he's playing Bitch Fantastic. When he does that, that to me is like a very underrated Bobby Moynihan sketch that's really great. And then I also, by the way, the sketch doesn't necessarily hold up, and for good reason, but I knew Bobby Moynihan before he was on SNL, because he was on Derek Comedy, which was Donald Glover's sketch show that it was used to be on YouTube. And he was in a sketch called Bro Rape that Bobby Moynihan got hired for SNL, I was like, oh my God, that's the guy from Derek Comedy. And I knew him. So you could look that up if you want to, but that's something that I do remember that is still online, I believe. And then I would say from Tom Hanks, the one, and I think John said this in the chat, if I saw correctly, Mr. Short-Term Memory for me is like an all-timer that I love from Tom Hanks. I still get that theme song stuck in my head every now and then. So I really, really love that one. Okay, let's take this next question from Jason McKenzie. Jason wants to know okay, so let's turn our attention to Amy Schumer coming up. We talked a lot about the Jack Harlow episode. Jason wants to know, why is the internet so down on Amy Schumer hosting SNL? I thought she was great when she has hosted. So James, do you have any perspective on this?
This really, I would say, goes into two categories, and I'll explain them. The one category I feel like is the most common, which is there's a lot of joke theft in her career, a lot of joke theft. And again, it's, I lie more on the side of like, hey, like a lot of people just think the same things, and we got bigger problems to worry about. So, but yeah, there's a lot of joke theft, and the jokes that she does have are very one note. It's all about her. Are we allowed to say pussy on here, John?
Well, you did it already, so there you go.
I thought you were gonna. Okay, all right. Well,
you could have spelled it out for me, but yeah. But anyways, yes.
Okay. But yeah, so that's
that's
the
problem. Like that's not a good thing that she does that.
Well, no. I just think like if you have a comedian who's very one note and like does like just one thing and only talks about one thing, which I feel like is how a lot of people perceive her. People want variety. People want comedians talking about a bunch of things. And the other reason, and again, a lot of sexism and misogyny. A lot of people, make fun of her for how she looks, and I feel like that's. I feel like that's where it started. And I'm not saying like I'm a huge fan of Amy Schumer, but they're like sexism and misogyny, like I feel like is at its core of this hatred of Amy Schumer. And I don't like it, and it's you cannot like her for possible joke theft, or her humor is very one note. But yeah, there's the amount of misogyny. It's sad.
Thomas?
Yeah, I've heard the joke theft thing, and some examples are more clear cut than others, as far as she goes. And I think I subscribe to there's a lot of parallel thinking that goes on in comedy. I've also heard that she might try too hard as far as like the sexual types of comedy that she likes to do. But I agree with James. I think a lot of it is misogyny for sure. I think when there's a strong uh, a woman with a strong personality who's opinionated, who maybe talks about sex a lot and stuff, I think there's a lot of misogynistic responses to that. I think when we say divisive, it's because people are put off by women who do have those type A strong personalities, and whether they want to admit it or not, I think if a man had the same type of humor as Amy Schumer and conducted himself in the same way, there would be less criticism of him than of Amy Schumer. So I completely agree. I think maybe some reactions to Amy Schumer are fair if her comedy is not your type of comedy necessarily. It's not really mine, to be quite honest with you. But I think a lot of it does boil down to misogyny.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know that I have a good answer to this question, Jason, to be honest with you, because I don't really get it. Like I understand what James is saying. I understand what Thomas is saying. And those are all very reasonable thoughts. That is potentially why. But for me, like I haven't seen any evidence of like anything that would turn me off to Amy Schumer. I mean, you could have like your personal brand of comedy that you either she does it for you or she doesn't. And that I will take as fair criticism of like, oh, Amy Schumer's just like not for me. So like I don't really enjoy seeing her on SNL. That's fine. But I just think that like there is like an overwhelming amount of like negative like feedback that came out when she was announced as the host. And it's surprising. Like it was probably the most negative I've seen a host announcement in the 3 years I've been doing this. And I don't really get it, to be honest.
I do apologize for saying
don't worry. You're fine.
I will pay the censors when this goes out to Apple and Spotify. I will pay the censors, I promise. And if you do watch Amy Schumer stand up, she does. I believe she even said it in her first monologue, if I'm correct. Right? I haven't seen it in a while, but I believe she does.
She says what?
So
she says what?
You're getting me, John.
All right, let's go to to our final question of the night, and that will be also from Ike, who wants to know, in honor of the divisiveness that Amy Schumer brings, name me an SNL host that you do like, but a lot of people don't seem to. So, Thomas, is there an SNL host that people don't seem to like, but you have a thing for?
Yeah, even though he's a 5-timer, I've seen a lot of really mixed opinions about Jonah Hill, who I love as a host, but I've seen a lot of people online either not like him or not like his stints on SNL. They don't like the little kid at the Benihana, which I really enjoy that sketch. They seem not just like a lot of the work that he's done on the show or just Jonah Hill in general. So I really enjoy Jonah Hill, and I think he does a good job hosting SNL, and he's a 5-timer. So he would be my Seth Rogen. I enjoy too, and they're kind of in the same boat. I think a lot of those Apatow comedic actors seem to be divisive online. But yeah, Jonah Hill would probably be my number one, which sounds weird because again, he is a 5-timer.
James, who are your picks?
Oh my God, I can't remember his name. It's oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember, but he hosted twice. Oh my God, he was
Any other descriptors?
He was in yeah. All right. He was in a couple of commercials. He sold steak. He sold hotels. I can't remember his name, but
he sold steak. Okay, yeah.
He sold. I can't remember, but he was pretty good.
Do you want me to name you all the 2-time male hosts?
You know what's weird? You have that list, and I probably do as well, just not my own. But no. But seriously, I'm gonna go with. I remember when he hosted someone else when he hosted, a lot of people were like, he flubbed his lines a lot, but I liked him, and that was Liev Schreiber. He just had this charm about him that I really and like yeah, he flubbed his lines a lot, but I thought he was pretty good. And coincidentally, he hosted the last midterms episode. We're coming up on the next one, so it is interesting to see who they get. They haven't announced it yet, but I liked when he hosted, and I'd like to see him again. And I do want to point out that for those who weren't clear, that the first person was Trump. And I also apologize for saying that if that's, but yeah.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So don't worry, you're doing great. So I will say that the one that stands out for me is probably the Sarah Michelle Gellar episodes. I think to me are extremely like not appreciated enough, and I think she was a really great host of Saturday Night Live. So I've seen like a lot of people, especially like when I've gone back to check out like reviews of those shows, they were like not that big of a fan of her as an SNL host, and I think she was a fantastic SNL host and one I would love to see again.
Yeah, she was in the classic dysfunctional family dinner sketch, the I drive a Dodge Stratus. That was Sarah Michelle Gellar that was in there. And I thought she was good in that sketch. I thought she played well with Anna Gasteyer and Will Ferrell. That's a good one, John.
Yeah.
Although
for
her
sure.
last hosted episode was notorious, in which, like, it was just it's a bad episode. I will say it's nothing to do with Sarah, but it's just a bad episode. Her last hosted one, and the week after, Lauren just ratted out everyone. Apparently, is what I believe. Someone who's been on the show before, Dean Edwards, I believe that's what he said once. Is that after that week was so bad, and Lauren ratted out everyone because of that episode. So, but no, you're right. Sarah Michelle Gellar, great host.
Yeah. Okay, well, that does it for the questions from this week. Thanks to everybody who sent them in. And of course, we'll be back next Thursday night with more questions and with a couple of new patrons to talk about everything from the Amy Schumer episode and look forward to the mystery episode 6 episode, which we should know who is hosting in a couple days' time. So, James, thank you for joining us tonight. I think you were fantastic tonight, by the way. It's just so much great insight. Loved all the jokes and all the swearing and stuff. Get the jar ready. So, appreciate you coming on with us. Anything you want to plug?
Well, thank you, John. You can find me at any bathroom at any Barnes and Noble. I'm having the time of my life in there. You can find me. I don't use social media that often, but you can follow me on TikTok. JMA has TikTok now. You can follow me on Insta. JMA has Insta now. You want to hit me up? Yeah, I'm not up to much. Yeah. I'll plug Thomas's podcast so he doesn't have to. Go listen to SNL Hall of Fame. It's pretty good.
Well, I know that he does have to, or else he will get his librarian card removed. So, Thomas, you want to plug away?
Yeah, thank you for that, James. I'll still plug my podcast, though. So I'm the co-host and chief librarian of the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. We've been having a lot of fun with it. We're a few episodes in. This past week, a wonderful episode with the great Bill Kenny, who you all know. He joined me to talk about Jan Hooks, which was an episode that was so near and dear to my heart. We all love Jan Hooks, so that was a great episode. Coming up on Monday, we have Alec Baldwin as the topic for discussion. So we, the SNL Hall of Fame committee, felt that Alec Baldwin was worthy of discussion, and so he
deserves a shot.
He didn't. Thank you, John.
I knew you were going to do that.
Yes, I was just kind of waiting for it. And Will Norman, who's a great patron for the Saturday Night Network, is my guest for the Alec Baldwin episode, and it was a really great conversation. Will is a great guest and everything, and then a special peak November 14th is going to be Dave Grohl, which I'm super excited about that episode. So that's what we have coming up on the SNL Hall of Fame. Check us out.
Awesome. Really excited for that. And I believe I have some episodes coming out in the SNL Hall of Fame at some point this season. Dates
Yeah, you do.
TBD, but I will promote when they do come. So looking forward to that. And then, of course, Saturday night, we will be back to talk through this Amy Schumer and Steve Lacy episode. So we got some really fun guests coming on the Hot Take Show. Hope you're all able to join us at 1:10 a.m. And then it's a full week of podcasting. We are in it, folks. So really excited about the season kicking into flow gear now. So thanks to James and Thomas for joining us and everybody in the chat on this Thursday night. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.